At the time, I think it was fun. Yeah, because we had a really good band, didn't we, Jim?
Oh, that was one of the great
And
bands of all time.
we all loved one another, you know. And Les was super, and we had a good band.
Yeah.
And it really was nice. Except that I was separated from my boy, my little boy.
Right.
And that was kind of difficult. But outside of that, it was really fun. And it was a great experience. It was a marvelous time in my life.
Doris Day truly despised him more than anyone else, and that feeling ran deep. Long before the spotlight, Doris Day was born Doris Marianne Koff on April 3, 1922, in Cincinnati, Ohio, right in the middle of a struggling America. She was raised in a modest, middle-class household during the harsh years of the Great Depression, where nothing came easy and every dream felt like a long shot. From a young age, Doris had non-stop energy and a serious love for performing, but Hollywood wasn't even on her radar yet. Her heart was set on dance, and she wasn't playing around. She trained hard, stayed disciplined, and showed real talent, even winning local dance competitions with a partner. People around her could tell she was going places fast. Then everything fell apart in an instant. A devastating car accident shattered her leg and completely wiped out her future as a professional dancer. Just like that, the dream she worked so hard for was gone, and recovery was long, painful, and brutal. But while she was stuck at home healing, something unexpected happened. With nothing but time and a radio, Doris started singing along to the music, and that's when it hit. Her voice was smooth, natural, and powerful without even trying. Friends and family pushed her to take it seriously, and soon she was performing with local bands like it was second nature. That's when band leader Barney Rapp noticed her and suggested she change her last name. Inspired by her constant performance of the song Day by Day, the name Doris Day was born and a new chapter officially began. Her big break came in the mid-1940s when she joined Les Brown's orchestra, one of the hottest swing bands around. In 1945, Doris recorded Sentimental Journey, a track that exploded in popularity and became the emotional soundtrack for World War II servicemen returning home, locking her place in music history forever. Her voice hit people right in the chest from the very first note. Warm, crystal clear, and emotionally real, Doris Day sounded different from everyone else on the radio. Sentimental Journey didn't just climb the charts, it wrapped America in comfort, hope, and honesty at a time when the country was worn down and desperate for all three. Hollywood couldn't ignore that kind of pull for long. In 1948, Doris made her film debut in Romance on the High Seas, what was supposed to be a small acting shot that suddenly exploded into something way bigger. That one role cracked the door open and she walked straight through it with confidence. Doris had a rare mix that studios couldn't manufacture. She was naturally beautiful, but never cold or untouchable, and she didn't lean on flashy glamour to stand out. Instead, she radiated sincerity, like someone you already trusted, and her comedic timing felt effortless, not rehearsed. Audiences rooted for her instantly, seeing either themselves or the best version of everyday American womanhood staring back at them on screen. By the 1950s, she wasn't just popular, she was unstoppable. Doris Day became one of Hollywood's most bankable stars, leading hit after hit while proving she could sing, act, and deliver comedy without missing a beat. Her dramatic power shut down critics for good with Love Me or Leave Me in 1955. Playing singer Ruth Etting, Doris showed a raw intensity and emotional depth that caught everyone off guard and wiped out any remaining doubts about her range. Still, even as she pushed boundaries, Hollywood kept trying to box her in as the endlessly cheerful, wholesome girl next door, a label she never fully accepted. In 1956, The Man Who Knew Too Much, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, gave Doris Day one of the most unforgettable moments of her entire career. When she performed the song Que Sera, Whatever Will Be, Whatever Will Be, it wasn't just a movie scene, it was history being made. The song became her signature, won an Academy Award, and shot far beyond the film itself, turning into a timeless anthem about fate, acceptance, and hope that perfectly matched Doris Day's own outlook on life. By the late 1950s and into the early 1960s, Doris Day's place as a romantic comedy powerhouse was locked in. Her wildly popular on-screen pairings with Rock Hudson lit up theaters and defined an era of sleek, playful Hollywood romance that audiences couldn't get enough of. Doris's comedic style was sharp, confident, and perfectly timed. She brought intelligence and independence to her roles, quietly pushing against the limits placed on women at the time. Even when her characters followed social expectations, she infused them with self-respect, personal agency, and moral clarity, giving her performances a deeper meaning that went beyond laughs. Off-screen, her success was just as massive. Doris Day was one of the most successful recording artists of the 20th century, cutting hundreds of songs across pop, jazz, and classic standards. Her voice, pure, expressive, and emotionally direct, carried a timeless power that refused to fade, staying relevant long after musical trends shifted. Whether she was singing a soft, heart-tugging ballad or a bright, upbeat tune, Doris Day always delivered real emotion. No fake flair, no forced drama. What people heard was exactly who she was, and that honesty carried over into her personal life as well. Behind the fame and flawless smile, Doris's private world was shaped by fierce devotion and painful heartbreak, especially through a series of marriages that deeply influenced her path as a woman, a mother, and a Hollywood legend. Her first marriage came too early. In 1941, still young and just stepping toward stardom, Doris married Al Jordan. It started with hope and big dreams, but that promise quickly collapsed into chaos. The marriage brought her greatest personal joy, her only child, a son named Terry, who became the emotional center of her life away from the cameras.
But the relationship itself was troubled and unstable. Jordan's behavior created an environment filled with fear and uncertainty during years that should have been filled with excitement and growth. Doris carried that weight quietly, staying strong for her son while navigating a reality no one saw. In 1943, she made a hard but powerful choice. With grit and self-respect, Doris ended the marriage, putting safety and dignity first and refusing to live behind a picture-perfect illusion. It was a bold move, especially at a time when women were expected to stay silent and endure. By 1946, Doris took another chance at love, marrying saxophonist George Wilder. The relationship offered companionship and a clean slate, but the pressure of her skyrocketing fame changed everything. As her career exploded and her image became Hollywood gold, the marriage struggled to keep up, and once again, the personal cost of success came sharply into focus. The weight of fame and deep personal differences finally crushed her second marriage. By 1949, the relationship quietly fell apart, leaving Doris Day once again standing on her own, trying to balance love, survival, and a career moving at full speed. What came next would become the most important and most complicated marriage of her life. In 1951, Doris married Martin Melcher, a man who didn't just step into a personal world, but locked himself into her professional life as well. Melcher formally adopted her son, taking on the role of father, and soon became the producer behind many of Doris Day's biggest films. Together, they built the image of America's sweetheart, a brand that dominated screens for years. For 17 years, their marriage ran parallel to the peak of her fame and productivity. On the surface, everything looked polished and perfect, but behind closed doors, the reality was far more troubling. The relationship was later exposed as one marked by control and serious financial mismanagement, shadows that stayed hidden while her career flourished. When Melcher passed away in 1968, the marriage ended, but the real shock was just beginning. Doris soon uncovered how deeply her finances had been mishandled during their time together, a discovery that hit hard and cut deep. Still, Doris Day refused to give up on love. In 1976, she married again, this time to restaurateur Barry Comden, hoping for companionship far away from Hollywood's non-stop spotlight. The promise didn't last, though, and by 1981, the marriage unraveled, closing the chapter on her fourth and final union. Across 4 marriages, Doris Day lived through love, loss, betrayal, endurance, and raw resilience, experiences that shaped the woman behind the legend. Doris Day's love life was often messy and unpredictable, but she came out the other side with a spirit unbroken. She refused to be defined by failed marriages, choosing instead to stand on her strength, her loyalty to her son, and the quiet grace she showed when life hit hardest. No matter what she endured, Doris kept moving forward with her head held high. For decades, Doris Day and Rock Hudson was sold as Hollywood's dream couple. On screen, they looked flawless together. Perfectly matched smiles, effortless charm, playful tension, and picture-perfect romance in films like Pillow Talk, Lover Come Back, and Send Me No Flowers. Audiences bought into the fantasy completely. But behind that studio-crafted image, the truth was way more complicated. Years later, Doris made it clear that her feelings toward Hudson weren't simple nostalgia. Beneath the smiles were layers of disappointment, frustration, and a sense of betrayal she rarely spoke out loud about. Doris was known for her warmth, discipline, and no-nonsense professionalism. She valued honesty above almost everything, especially in an industry built on smoke and mirrors. When she talked about trust, she said it straight. "I believed in being straightforward. If you didn't have that, you didn't have much." That belief is exactly why the emotional fallout with Rock Hudson cut so deep. Even though their on-screen chemistry was electric, Doris eventually felt that their friendship had been built on something that wasn't fully real at the time. During their films together, she was unaware that Hudson was gay, a fact the studio system carefully kept hidden. When the truth became public years later, Doris was shaken, not because of who Hudson was, but because of the long-running deception that surrounded it. For Doris Day, the pain wasn't about identity, it was about trust being broken, and that loss hit harder than any headline ever could. It wasn't what he was, Doris Day later explained, it was that everyone knew but me. That realization hit hard and left her feeling deeply embarrassed and exposed. To Doris, it felt like she had been turned into a prop inside a carefully staged lie, all to protect the studio's image and financial interests. The betrayal cut even deeper because Rock Hudson wasn't just a co-star, he was someone she believed she truly knew. "I trusted Rock," she admitted, reflecting on the years they spent laughing, rehearsing, and working side by side. She believed there was real honesty between them, a genuine bond built through shared experience. Finding out that the romance sold to the public had been knowingly false shattered that belief. This wasn't harmless movie magic to Doris. It felt like a violation of her personal integrity and a misuse of her trust that she never agreed to. Over time, that pain hardened into resentment, especially as fans continued to celebrate their pairing as if it had actually happened. "People talked about us like it actually happened," she once said, and she was forced to smile through it, carrying a truth she wouldn't allow to speak. That silence, demanded by the studio system, became its own kind of cruelty.
They were very special.
Yeah.
And they weren't staying at my house, but I invited them over for a swim and a bite to eat. I took them out to eat.
Doris believed that Hudson, protected by the system, never truly paid the emotional price for the deception, while she carried the weight of it for years. When Hudson later revealed his AIDS diagnosis in the 1980s, Doris's feelings became even more complex. She showed compassion and supported AIDS research during a time of fear and misunderstanding, but she refused to rewrite history or pretend the hurt never existed. "I was sorry for him," Doris Day said quietly, but that didn't erase what happened. Those words captured a woman who refused to let tragedy wipe away years of deception. For Doris, sympathy didn't mean forgetting, and it never meant excusing. Behind closed doors, she was even more direct. "I felt foolish," she admitted, and added plainly that she didn't like being made to look foolish. That honesty explained why her feelings toward Rock Hudson ran so deep. This wasn't simple hatred or bitterness. It was the kind of anger that grows when trust is broken, when a professional partnership you believed in turns out to be shaped by secrets you never agreed to carry. Despite Hollywood's obsession with preserving their image as the perfect pair, Doris Day refused to dress up the truth. "What you saw on screen wasn't my life," she stated firmly, "and it wasn't the truth." In the end, her strongest criticism wasn't aimed only at Hudson, but at the system that encouraged lies, rewarded silence, and treated people like props. Still, Hudson remained the face of that betrayal in her memory, a reminder of everything she was never told. Doris Day lived long enough to tell her story on her own terms. While history may frame her and Rock Hudson as cinematic soulmates, her own words remind us that behind the smiles was a woman who felt deeply wronged and never fully let that pain go. Doris Day passed away peacefully on May 13, 2019, at her cherished home in Carmel Valley, California, at the age of 97. Her death, caused by pneumonia, marked the quiet closing of one of the most luminous lives in American entertainment, an ending as gentle as the music that defined her legacy. After stepping away from Hollywood, Doris Day didn't disappear, she reclaimed herself. Tired of the lies, pressure, and manufactured smiles, she chose peace over applause and walked away from an industry that had taken more than it ever gave back. While many stars chased relevance, Doris chased quiet, purpose, and control over her own life. She settled into a simpler existence, far from studio lots and gossip columns, focusing on what mattered most to her: her son, her animals, and her values. Doris became a fierce advocate for animal welfare, pouring her energy into causes that spoke to her heart. This wasn't a publicity move or image repair. It was personal, and she meant it. In 1978, she launched The Doris Day Show for television interviews, giving fans a rare glimpse of the real woman behind the legend. Calm, thoughtful, and unfiltered, she finally spoke without studio handlers or scripts, proving she never needed Hollywood to define her voice. As the years passed, Doris became more selective about how she was remembered. She turned down tributes, avoided the spotlight, and refused to let nostalgia rewrite her truth. Fame had cost her too much to be romanticized, and she wasn't interested in pretending otherwise. To those who truly listened, Doris Day's life told a deeper story. Behind the sunny songs and polished films was a woman who survived control, deception, and heartbreak, and still chose kindness without surrendering her boundaries. Her legacy isn't just music or movies, it's resilience, self-respect, and the courage to walk away when the price gets too high. Doris Day didn't just entertain America, she outgrew it on her own terms. As time moved on, public opinion around Doris Day began to shift. What was once dismissed as wholesome charm slowly revealed itself as something far stronger: quiet defiance wrapped in grace. Critics and historians started looking closer, realizing that Doris wasn't sheltered or naive. She was strategic, disciplined, and tougher than anyone gave her credit for. Her choice to step back from Hollywood wasn't retreat, it was control. Doris understood the cost of visibility and refused to let the industry keep rewriting her story. While others clung to fame, she protected her peace, proving that walking away can be its own kind of power. New generations discovered her work without the old studio filters. They heard the honesty in her voice, saw the confidence in her performances, and recognized the subtle strength she brought to roles that once seemed simple. What looked light was actually layered, and what looked easy was earned. Doris Day never chased reinvention or approval. She stayed grounded in her values, even when it made her less marketable. That refusal to bend is exactly why her legacy aged so well. Trends faded, scandals cooled, but her work stayed steady, human, and real. Today, Doris Day stands as more than a nostalgic icon. She represents endurance without bitterness, kindness without surrender, and strength without noise. Her story reminds us that you don't have to shout to be powerful. Sometimes the strongest statement is knowing when to step away. In the end, Doris Day didn't need to rewrite her image.
time did it for her, stripping away the illusion and revealing the truth. A woman who survived Hollywood, kept her soul intact, and left behind a legacy built on honesty, resilience, and self-respect. Long after the camera stopped rolling, Doris Day's influence kept echoing through Hollywood. Actors, singers, and filmmakers continued to reference her work, not just for its charm, but for its discipline and emotional honesty. She set a standard that didn't rely on shock or scandal. It relied on craft, consistency, and heart.
What made Doris different was how she protected herself when no one else would. In an era where studios owned faces, voices, and lives, she quietly drew lines. She didn't always win those battles, but she learned from them, and that wisdom shaped the way she lived afterward. Younger audiences eventually saw past the sunshine image. They recognized the strength it took to survive a system that thrived on control and silence. Doris wasn't fragile, she was guarded, and there's a big difference. That realization reshaped how her career was judged and respected. Her music continued to find new listeners. Songs that once comforted a post-war nation now felt personal, raw, and sincere to people facing their own uncertainty. That timeless connection proved her voice wasn't stuck in the past. It still spoke to the present. Doris Day never tried to explain herself to critics or chase late-life applause. She let the work stand on its own, trusting the truth eventually rises. And it did. Honors came later, but they came with understanding, not illusion. In the final balance, Doris Day's story isn't about perfection. It's about survival with dignity, success without surrender, and choosing self-respect over approval. She didn't burn out, fade away, or break down. She endured, quietly and completely, leaving behind a legacy that keeps getting stronger with time. In the end, Doris Day didn't need redemption arcs or dramatic comebacks to seal her place in history. Her legacy settled in quietly, built on consistency, heart, and a refusal to let Hollywood define her worth. While louder stars burned out or faded fast, Doris stayed steady, and that calm strength hit harder than any scandal ever could. She proved that softness doesn't mean weakness. Beneath the warm smile and gentle voice was a woman who understood boundaries, consequences, and self-respect. Doris learned the hard way, but she learned well, and she carried those lessons without turning bitter or cruel. What still surprises people today is how modern she feels. Her choices, stepping away, protecting her peace, rejecting fake narratives, line up perfectly with conversations happening now. Doris was ahead of the curve without trying to be, and that's real power. Fans didn't just love her work, they trusted her. That trust came from honesty, not perfection. She didn't pretend life was always easy, and she never sold pain as entertainment. She showed strength through grace, and that left a mark that never faded. Doris Day's story isn't wrapped in glitter or illusion anymore. It's clear, grounded, and human. She survived control, deception, and heartbreak without losing her empathy or her standards, and that balance is rare. When people remember Doris Day today, they don't just remember a star. They remember a woman who stayed true when it cost her, who walked away when she had to, and who left behind a legacy built on dignity, resilience, and quiet courage. What makes Doris Day's story linger isn't just what she achieved, it's what she refused to become. She never let bitterness turn her cold, and she never let fame bully her into losing her values. That balance took real strength, and it showed in every chapter of her life. In an industry that rewarded noise, chaos, and compromise, Doris chose restraint and self-control. She didn't chase controversy or headlines, and she didn't sell her pain for sympathy. Instead, she protected her inner world, even when the outside world tried to claim it. There's a reason her work still feels sincere today. Every song, every performance carried emotional truth, not exaggeration. People believed her because she meant what she gave, and that kind of authenticity doesn't expire. Doris Day also changed expectations quietly. She showed that a woman could be gentle without being weak, successful without being ruthless, and independent without shouting it from the rooftops. That quiet confidence challenged old rules more than louder rebellion ever could. As time passed, The image of Doris Day stripped itself down to the essentials. What remained wasn't a cartoon version of happiness, but a real woman who endured disappointment, protected her child, and stood her ground when trust was broken. That honesty reshaped how her life is understood. In the final view, Doris Day didn't just survive Hollywood, she outgrew it. She left behind songs that comfort, films that still charm, and a story that proves strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sings softly, stands firm, and walks away when necessary. At the end of it all, Doris Day stands as a reminder that real strength doesn't need constant validation. She lived through the highs of fame and the lows of betrayal, yet never let either define her completely. What mattered most to her wasn't applause, it was peace, honesty, and living without regret. Hollywood tried to freeze her in time, trapping her inside a sunny image that only told half the story. But Doris refused to let that version erase the woman behind it. She understood that survival sometimes means stepping out of the frame and choosing your own ending. Her life proves that dignity can be louder than scandal. While others burned bridges or chased attention, Doris built distance, protected what mattered, and let time do the talking. That patience paid off, reshaping her legacy without her having to fight for it. Even now, her voice carries warmth that feels personal. It doesn't shout, it doesn't push, it comforts. That emotional honesty is why her work keeps finding new listeners long after the headlines faded. Doris Day didn't ask to be misunderstood, but she refused to stay silent forever. When she finally spoke, she did it on her terms, with clarity instead of anger, and truth instead of performance. That choice sealed her place beyond myth.
In the end, Doris Day wasn't just America's sweetheart. She was her own woman. She lived fully, loved deeply, endured quietly, and walked away when necessary. Her story closes not with spectacle, but with strength, grace, and a legacy that still shines without asking for permission. If Doris Day's life teaches anything, it's that survival doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks calm, controlled, and deeply intentional. She didn't win every fight, but she chose which battles were worth her soul. And that decision shaped everything that came after. She understood something many never do. Fame is loud, but peace is priceless. Doris watched Hollywood chew through people, strip them down, and move on without looking back. When she stepped away, it wasn't fear, it was wisdom speaking loud and clear. What makes her story hit so hard is how human it feels. She trusted, she was disappointed, she felt hurt, and she carried those scars without turning cruel. Doris didn't deny the pain, she just refused to let it turn her into someone she wasn't. Her legacy isn't built on perfection, it's built on consistency, honesty, and knowing when enough is enough. She showed strength can exist without aggression, and confidence doesn't need constant approval to survive. Even now, her name carries a certain calm. It reminds people of a time when sincerity mattered, when performances felt personal, and when dignity still had weight. That feeling didn't happen by accident. Doris earned it. In the final measure, Doris Day's greatest role wasn't on screen. It was the life she built after the camera stopped rolling. She chose truth over illusion, peace over pressure, and self-respect over applause. And that choice turned her story into something timeless. Doris Day didn't just leave behind songs and films. She left behind a blueprint for endurance, grace, and knowing when to walk away with your head held high. By the time the world finally slowed down enough to truly understand Doris Day, her story had already spoken for itself. The smile people remembered wasn't a mask, it was a choice. A choice to stay kind in an industry that rewarded hardness, and to stay human in a system that often erased it. Doris didn't pretend life was gentle. She knew disappointment, control, and loss up close, and she carried that knowledge with clarity instead of denial. What set her apart was how she responded, not with revenge or noise, but with boundaries and self-respect. She showed that you don't need to destroy others to protect yourself. Walking away, staying quiet, and choosing peace can be acts of strength when done with purpose. Doris mastered that balance, even when the cost was high. As her legacy continues to be re-examined, one truth stands firm. Doris Day wasn't sheltered by Hollywood, she survived it. She learned how the game worked, paid its price, and then stepped off the board when it no longer served her. Her life now reads less like a fairy tale and more like a lesson. Trust carefully, guard what matters, speak when it counts, and never let anyone else decide who you are. Doris Day's story doesn't end with applause fading or credits rolling. It lives on in the quiet confidence she modeled, the dignity she protected, and the courage it took to choose herself in a world that constantly asked for more. In the final view, Doris Day didn't fade into history. She settled into it, firmly, honestly, and on her own terms. Laughter, grace, and an unbreakable spirit defined Doris Day to the very end. The news of her passing was shared with the world by the Doris Day Animal Foundation, the organization she built and protected for decades. That announcement reflected exactly who she was. Compassion, care, and advocacy for animals weren't side projects for Doris. They were core values she lived by every single day. True to her nature, Doris had made her wishes clear long before her passing. She asked for no funeral services, no grave marker, no public memorials, no grand ceremonies. Instead, she chose simplicity and privacy, believing her life should be remembered through the joy she gave, the kindness she showed, and the timeless work she left behind. That final decision said everything about who she truly was. Despite global fame, Doris Day remained deeply private, guided by the belief that love, laughter, and generosity spoke louder than monuments ever could. And even without public gatherings, the world mourned her in its own way. Fans shared memories, replayed beloved films, sang along to cherished songs, and flooded the world with tributes. Fellow artists honored her influence, and generations reflected on what her work meant to them. Doris Day's legacy didn't need a marker. It lives on in the warmth of her performances, the purity of her voice, and the compassion that defined her later years. Her passing wasn't an ending, it was a gentle farewell. Doris Day remains a reminder of a time when optimism, sincerity, and grace truly mattered, both on screen and beyond. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with others, and leave a comment below. Let us know what Doris Day meant to you and which part of her legacy stayed with you the most.